After Van Halen's debut album, Eddie Van Halen was still driving a beat-up junker, a $700 car. Eddie Van Halen's old friend and the famous rock journalist Steve Rosen talks about his encounter with that car, listening to the second Van Halen album, Van Halen 2, and just getting to know Edward, as he calls him, on Rock History Music. So Eddie wants you to listen to the record. Comes up in a $700 car. Tell me about that.
He's the garbage. And so this is like after the second album had come out. I think he's still living at home, or maybe he just moved in to the house with Valerie. Valerie bought the house in Coldwater, and that's where Edward moved to, out of his parents' house in Pasadena. So yeah, Edward calls me, or maybe he just drove over. I think he called me this time. He says, hey man, work on a new record, man. I want to come over and play the record, So he comes over, and Edward would bring cassettes, because we're in cassette era, right? And guitars, and I think there were drums. I don't even know if there was bass. There certainly were no vocals.
Yeah.
And we sit down in his car, man, and he'd play me all the tracks from Van Halen 2. And then we'd go up into the house, and he'd pick up one of my guitars, and he'd show me what he was playing, and that was amazing. I mean, as surreal as it was, listening to the track without, vocals, kind of unadorned, unmixed. I mean, that was amazing. But then having him in the house, and pick up one of my electrics, unplugged, and he'd play those riffs, and you'd watch what he was doing, and you'd go, oh my God, the guy really is from another planet. I mean, because you can't appreciate how extraordinary he is until you see it up close. I mean, again, I hate to bring it up, but Da Vinci or Picasso, I mean, we look at the paintings, man, but if you were sitting over their shoulders and watching them with the brushstrokes, you'd go, oh my God, they're more amazing than I could have ever imagined, Or John Steinbeck typing away on his typewriter. It's like, oh my God, how did he think of it? So yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, he drives up in this piece of garbage, $700 car that he was very proud of, that he had bought with, proceeds from album sales, and I mean, it was a piece of shit. I mean, it really was. It was lousy. I mean, I had a nicer car than he did. My car was lousy,
But it's interesting, going into the second record, he still didn't know how much money he made from the first. He didn't quite know.
No, he didn't. And exactly. And I don't know what those contracts were. But, man, a record deal back in the day, yeah, I'm sure they got a really nice advance, but then you have to pay all that advance back before you make one penny off the next, off a record royalty. And then you get, I don't know what you get, 10 or 15% of retail or wholesale. So I don't know, they made a dollar a record. I mean, I'm just tossing rough numbers. I'm probably somewhere around that. So, I got to sell, I don't know what their advance was, 250 grand, probably. Yeah, you guys sell 250,000 records. That's a sick little record for a new band. And he would tell me that, Warner's had no faith in Van Halen, that they were really going to sell any amount of records. So yeah, it was all those things. So yeah, I guess a $700 car was like, yeah, that was the top of his, checkbook range. But I mean, what's amazing is, it's not too long after that, we see him driving the unbelievable Lamborghini Miras and the Countaches and the Porsches and the tricked out Jeeps, and, and so his taste certainly got more expensive, and certainly he had the wherewithal to, fulfill those, desires. So, and good for him.
The kids in the hall, I remember we'd walk by each other. We'd go, running with the devil. When I was in high school. That song, I remember that when I first heard that, I remember thinking, this is the feeling I got as a Catholic boy listening to Zeppelin 4 and thinking, oh, I'm going to get, I remember laughing at myself because I was getting out of that by then, right? Because I think it was 18 or something. But Zeppelin 4. I mean, that was many years before. And you'd get that these Catholic boys, but girls would go, "Ooh, something's going to happen to me if I listen to this album." It's so stupid looking back at your teenager prepubescent self. You're going, "What the hell?" Are your other books available? They're all available, right?
They're not. They're not. They're all out of print. I wrote a book in '78 about Jeff Beck that came out in Japan only. It was in all Japanese anyway, but I wrote a book on Free and Bad Company. I wrote a book on Sabbath. There's a book on Prince, a book on Springsteen. I never interviewed Prince or Springsteen. Somebody approached me to write those books, and they were good books. They're not brilliant, but they were good. I wrote a book on Randy Rhoads, but no, none of them are available. They're all out of print. I've been thinking about maybe revisiting them or maybe getting them released as ebooks, but I'm just kind of so busy with Tone Chaser. I just really haven't had the time to do that. But I've been thinking about it because they were really pretty good books. I mean, to be honest, they were pretty cool, those books.
Tone Chaser is the brand new book by Steve Rosen, who knew Eddie Van Halen going way back to 1977. It's a great book on so many different artists. Ronnie Montrose, an interesting run-in with him, Paul McCartney, Joe Cocker, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, most notably Bon Scott, Ritchie Blackmore. Now that's a colorful story. But mostly Eddie Van Halen, who he knew, like I said, going way, way back before the first Van Halen album was ever released. There's so much inside information in this book. It's one of my favorite books that I've read in a long time, and I really enjoy talking to Steve. His stories are magical, really. There'll be links in the description where you can pick it up. Remember, if you want to contribute to the channel, if you want to make a donation, there are links on every one of our videos to PayPal. You can make a PayPal donation. You can join our Patreon, get early access to all our videos. But remember, subscribe to the channel, like our videos, comment on them, and share them on social media. This is John Beaudin. More from Steve Rosen coming up in the next 2-3 days. This is Rock History Music. Take care.